10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 181. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 181 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Hope you're doing well out there. Thank you so much for tuning in once again, bringing you one of these Friday episodes with something brand new, something to work on, something to think about in your journey to be a better improviser and better musician in general. So this week we are going to continue our Tune of the Month series. And we're going to keep talking about the tune Ornithology, which we based last week's episode off of. Figured that would be some good continuity between our lick of the month and our tune of the month. So before we get into that, just wanted to remind you that you can get all the PDFs to every single episode, including the etude that I've written for all of you today, by going to our Patreon page. And you can find that by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners. All it costs you is $3 a month, and you get access to 181 episodes of jazz materials, and that's definitely enough to keep you busy for quite a while. So I've got to give a shout out to some of our new members this week. Some brand new people have signed up to get all those fantastic benefits. Thank you to David, Steve, Carlos, and Marcus. Thank you guys so much for joining and becoming part of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. So remember, you can become part of the family too, 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners, follow the instructions, and you get instant access to all of that stuff. And thank you to everybody out there that has been members for a long time. You really are the reason that this show keeps going. All right, let's jump into today's episode. So, as I just mentioned, this is our Tune of the Month episode where we take a concept and we put it into action over a jazz standard. And since we did Ornithology last week, I figured we'd write an etude over that this week and talk about a really specific melodic device that we can use. Now, let me first talk about the reasons that I chose this tune. So first of all, I think that this tune is great because it's actually two tunes in one. If you didn't know, Ornithology is actually a contrafact of How High the Moon, the great jazz standard. So when we work on this tune, it's kind of nice because we can play it in a number of different settings. We can choose to play that How High the Moon melody, or we can choose to make it much more bebop and complicated by playing Charlie Parker's Ornithology melody. So that fits into a lot of different situations quite nicely. You know, if we're playing a gig where we're not playing a lot of bebop, we could still play this chord progression, but simply just play a different melody over it. So that's the first reason that I chose this. It's very flexible. It's actually two tunes in one. Now, the second reason I chose this is because we're going to be doing kind of a complicated melodic device that I'll explain to you in a minute. And one of the things that I really love about this tune is that, let's say you're working on a 2-5-1 or some kind of device that goes around the circle of fourths. This tune is great because it goes through so many different keys, and it does so in a very logical way. So if you pull up your etude, I obviously have the chord progression printed on there. If you look at the first two measures, we start out in the key of concert G major. And then what we do is immediately that G major chord becomes a G minor chord, and that becomes the 2 chord of concert F major. So we're moving down by whole step. We're going from the key of G major to the key of F major by way of a 2-5-1. Then what we do is the same exact device happens in the key of F major. Now we start a 2-5 that goes down to the key of E flat major. And then what happens after that is actually we get another short 2-5-1 that goes into the key of G minor. So you can see there's like all of this stuff going on in this tune, and it fits a lot of the things that we like to practice here on the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson, which is like taking a device and moving it around to a bunch of different keys and doing a whole bunch of different flexible things with it so that we're not pigeonholing ourselves into just working on something in one key. We strive to be very, very flexible here on the show, and when we learn one concept, we want to be able to use it in a variety of different situations. So that's the second reason that I've chosen this tune. And when I was thinking about what tune I wanted to choose for this week's tune of the month, it was pretty obvious that I should just continue from last episode into this one. All right, so now let's jump into the actual device that I'm highlighting in this episode. It's both simple and complicated at the same time. So what I've done is created kind of a combination exercise. It's half rhythmic exercise and half melodic exercise, harmonic exercise. So the first part of it is that I wanted to get you guys using some eighth note triplets, because eighth note triplets are just an essential part of improvising in this style that we're all studying here together on this podcast. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing is we wanted to do a little bit more work on surrounding chord tones with other notes from the scale. And this exercise accomplishes both. So what we started by doing is we took the concert G major 7 chord and we put a triplet on beat 1, beat 3, and beat 1 of the next measure. And what this triplet is accomplishing is that we're starting on the root, we're going diatonically above the root, coming back to the root, and then we're going a half step below the root, okay? And then we're coming back to the root. And then we're going to do that on the third and on the fifth as well. So we're always going diatonically above and chromatically below the chord tone that we're trying to target. And this is going to result in some really cool lines that you could play that incorporate a little bit of diatonic motion and a little bit of chromatic motion, sort of all at the same time. So let's take a look at this first example. This is over a G major 7 chord, and it is surrounding each chord tone, the 1, 3, and the 5, diatonically above and chromatically below, incorporating a triplet. So there you have it. That is diatonically above and chromatically below, with that triplet built into it to give it much more of an interesting rhythmic feel. Now, what I've done for you is right below that first example, I've written an example but over a G minor 7 chord. And really it doesn't change anything all that much, right? It's just that we flat the third so that the intervallic relationship when we play the third changes a little bit, right? Because diatonically above is now going to be a whole step instead of a half step. So it does change things a little bit, but honestly, not all that much. Let's check out what it sounds like over minor. And you'll notice that nothing else changes. It's just that third. So what we want to try to do is use this device in as many different places as possible over the tune Ornithology. And the cool thing is you're going to have to just move this through so many different keys, through so many different chord qualities, that you're really going to start to get this into your playing without thinking about it all that much. Well, you're going to have to think about it a lot at first. But then after that, this little phrase, which I think is a great thing to use over so many different tunes in so many different places, just nice and melodic, involves that chromaticism, has an emphasis on chord tones, like so many of the things that we talk about and so many of the important facets to playing bebop are contained in this one little simple exercise that if you practice it over a tune like Ornithology, it's going to automatically transfer to so many different places in your playing. So what I've tried to do in the etude is use it all over the place, starting from every different chord tone, starting over every different quality of chord, just trying to use them in the most advantageous places where I think they're going to sound the best. So here's the thing. I'm going to give you an assignment this week, okay? I would like you to play the etude, see how I've kind of, dealt with this a little bit. Maybe take the individual exercises, practice them in a couple different keys, over a couple different qualities. But then I would like you to write your own etude this week over Ornithology. make it different from mine, but still base it off of this exercise that I've given you. Now, here's the thing about the etude and the etude that I want you to write is that we're really overusing this device. We're using it in such a way that we would never play like this in real life, where I'm kind of using this device like almost every single measure. And that's kind of the point, right? There are some other devices built into the etude, but the whole thing really centers around this little exercise that we were working on. So don't be afraid to be unbalanced, right? When we're trying to get something into our playing is unbalanced. And that's not something that we're worried about. So use it to death, get used to it. And then when you actually have it worked into your playing, you can back off a little bit. Okay, so let's check out the etude. I want to play the etude for you first so you can hear it. If you're in your car or not around the PDF, really listen for every time I'm using this little triplet device that's based around the chord tones. All right, let's try it. All right, so you can hear that I use that in just about every single measure. So I'm really trying to hammer it into my brain. I'm really trying to teach you what that sounds like. So that is a sound that you can reach for fairly easily once you get it worked into your vocabulary a little bit there. All right, we've gone way over time, but I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you enjoyed this tune of the month. If you have any questions on anything that I presented to you today, you can get in touch with me on the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group. Just search for that in Facebook, request to be added, and I will certainly get you in there. I'm checking that often, and that's where we have a lot of great discussions on this stuff. Remember, if you want to get your hands on the etude, we do have it in the concert pitch, B-flat, E-flat, and bass clef, and you can get that by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, signing up to pledge $3 a month, and you can get your hands on all those materials. All right? Hope you have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for listening week in and week out. Really appreciate it, and hopefully we're bringing you some value. All right? We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.